Does this mic work?
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's my pleasure today to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Troy Henderson, and he is the commander for the 8th Flight Training Squadron over at Vance Air Force Base. And having a little experience in this, I want to talk a little bit about aviators in a moment, but before I want to talk about him, he has contributed to his economy in a great way. He and his wife have about 72 acres over by Drummond, and they have four horses that they get to feed on a regular basis. So he's already contributed to our economy, but I want to talk about aviators and the economy. How much does flight pay now? It was $650 when I got out.
It still is, and then I think I got to the $825.
Oh, it's $825. Okay.
When you're maxed out.
Okay. Well, these young aviators come to our place, and they like to, if they're married, they spend a lot of stuff out there in the economy, but they also like to buy a lot of cars, they buy motorcycles, and they're a great boon to the Enid economy and the local economy. So if you were to pick an aviation, or if you pick an organization to have in our community, a flight training company or flight training squadron would probably be the best pick, because it's a great, and they're fine young men serving our country. And I appreciate your service. Troy is up for 06 in February. I wish him the best. And after that, he didn't know what he's going to do, but maybe he'll tell you that after doing this. Please welcome Troy Henderson.
Hopefully you're still applauding when I'm done. All right. Since I had an hour and a half to think about what I was going to talk to you guys driving up here, I put down a little bit of notes. And what was asked me to talk about was how to get into pilot training, which I think is probably more applicable for your children or grandchildren, depending on where you are in life, and then how to do well at pilot training, and then finally impact of Vance on the local community. I'm not the expert on that portion, but I got some facts, as we were all concerned about the fiscal constraints over the past couple of years, so a lot of that information made it down to us. Okay, so how to get in pilot, or how to get your kid or grandkid into pilot training. One, probably the most important thing is they need to have a desire, a want to do that for their job. And flying is unique. A lot of people get to do the job that they want to do and get paid for it. So it really is not a job. So you got that ultimate carrot out there that somebody else is paying you to do your hobby, do your passion. Now you lose a lot of control. You know, the Air Force, the military tells you where you got to go, what you got to do, and whether you're going to be deployed tomorrow, the next day. But on a training basis, it's really a unique opportunity to get to do something that you love to do, and then somebody else pays you for it. So it should be pretty easy to have that desire to go fly. You guys got a pretty big airport here, non-towered airfield. We come in occasionally, so I think aviation is a big factor here in Alva. It's one of the bigger non-towered airfields in the area, so hopefully your kids are getting to see that and then maybe getting motivated. Probably not a lot of air shows that are going on, at least not supposed to be air shows, other than looking up and maybe seeing a T6 flying around up in one of the MOAs. But just seeing that is a great way for the kids to get motivated. Hopefully there's Air Force Academy liaison officers that swing through the Alva high schools, and that's really how I was a farm kid growing up, small town, smaller than Alva, and that was my real first exposure. The Dayton Air Show, I got to see the cool loud planes, and then the liaison officer saying, "Hey, there's this opportunity for you if it's something you want to do," and they kind of took me under his wing and got me pointed in the right direction. I wasn't the smartest man, so you don't have to be crazy smart to do this, but you got to be good in something. So I was good in sports, so that's how I made it there. Went to the Air Force Academy, but there's a lot of other options afforded to you. The ROTC program, your kids will enjoy their life a little bit more than going to the Air Force Academy. And then finally, if they've started up a career doing something else, then the officer training school is another opportunity for them to get into the system. Well, let's see. Do you guys know, do liaison officers make it out here to the high schools?
Yeah.
They do?
There would be military recruiters from all the branches in
Okay.
the high schools. And the
All right.
college fair.
They've done some shrinking of our span of control, if you will, based on some of the stuff that happened at Lackland and recruiters and whatnot. And they went into big regions instead of having recruiters at every town because they didn't want people to be isolated, the military folks to be isolated juniors. So I wasn't sure how that worked out for you guys. Private flying time is only going to help build their airmanship. It's different flying civilian than it is flying military. All the same FAA rules exist, but it's a lot more structured, scripted. We're spending the taxpayers' money when we go out and do that, so we got to do what's in the best interest of the taxpayer. So that certainly helps to prepare them for it. If they're like me, I ended up not getting a pilot slot right out of my commissioning source, so I had to compete via active duty flying boards. And that meant going out and getting as many hours as I could, because that was a competitive aspect of it. Doing some random Air Force flying aptitude test, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's what they said I had to do, so I did. And then competed there. And that was right after or following Desert Storm when we shrunk down a lot of the pilot demand. So at that point, they were only giving 25 people that weren't out of the commissioning source pilot training slots. Now it's open back up again. And then I sum it up to have a desire to fly. If they're doing it for any other reason than that's what they want to do, if they're doing it to impress their parents or impress you, impress their classmates, impress their friends, it's just not going to be the motivation that they're going to need that I'll talk about in the next part of how to be successful in pilot training. Any questions on that? This is informal. If you have a question, raise a paw. That's really, I think, probably the greatest benefit you guys will get out of it is asking those questions that's been nagging at you for a while. So I'll stop at a moment's notice.
How many? What's the percentage of young men that come in there, young women that know how to fly before they get there?
They all have had some type of flying training. So if they had a private pilot's license, then they just show up at Vance with that private pilot's license. If they don't have a private pilot's license, then they take them through introductory flight screening program. So they take them out to Pueblo, and then there's one in Texas as well, and they go through like a mini deal to get them the hours to solo so that they have kind of an introduction to what it's going to be like. So 100% have had some airtime under their butt before they start flying the T6.
You were talking about the qualifications to be accepted at the Air Force Academy.
Sure.
I'd understood for many years that you had to have really high scores in high school, especially in science and math.
You do.
And secondly, I understood that you had to have some sort of political appointment.
Yes.
From some politician.
Okay? So I was, I guess, being somewhat humble. I did well in high school. I wasn't a 4.0 guy, but all A's and B's. And then the SAT and ACT test, I didn't score all that great. I was in the 900 range when a lot of those folks are in the 1200, 1300 range. If I hadn't been a blue chip athlete wrestling, then I wouldn't have gotten into the Air Force Academy. But for the traditional Air Force Academy student, any military academy student, they're going to probably be the valedictorian. They're going to be the 4.0, taking a lot of AP classes, getting in the high marks on ACT, SAT, unless they've got some unique aspect. So you got a presidential appointment, you got congressional appointment, and then you've got the track for some people. I think presidential is for those that parents were in the military, and then there's some for prior academy grads, so parents that were academy grads. But yeah, I went through I had to go through interview process, and that's what the liaison officer will help with when they talk to your kids. But they get you up in front of a bunch of either active duty military, reservists in the military, and then the congressional's appointees, and they interview the high school kids and see if they think that this kid is going to be a good representative of, because we're ultimately a representative of the taxpayer, and they don't want to send somebody that's not going to have a good character or have a good chance of succeeding. I think Senator DeWine, I think he had 3 per service academy to appoint. So there's a lot less senators than there are congressmen. The congressmen, I think, get 1 or 2. So there's the options there, and then there's also the ability to go to prep schools to then work your appointment through a prep school as well, even if you don't have a political appointment.
How many women pilots are there over there versus how many men?
It's close to. I'd be wagging it, but it's close to 20%, 15, 20% representative of the Air Force demographics. We've got 5, at least in T6s, we've got 5 female instructor pilots, and we've got a total of 70 IPs. So I don't know, I'm not going to do the mental math at that point in time. 140 and 10, yeah, that's about 10%, if you will. But they do. There's no difference. It's all about performance, and females, males, and I'll kind of get to that in the how you do well in pilot training. But there's a certain amount of God-given ability that resides in this. And not everybody's meant to be in that third dimension, and a lot of females do a better job than males. A lot of males do a better job than females. It's completely independent, and it was in the fighter world where there were less females than in the heavy world. So the pointy nose airplanes versus the big cargo airplanes. But now there's that same percentage of females in the fighter community, and they fit in just fine, despite what the newspapers say about how we're all out to sexually assault folks and everything. But they did great.
Do you have a specific area where you guys like flying fast enough where you produce a sonic boom?
Not in the T6. I fly the propeller airplanes, so the first one that they get to. I used to fly the T-38 here, which is the jet, and IFF, the Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals. And occasionally we would accidentally break the sound barrier, and we had to fill out a sonic boom log, put the time, the location, in case there was a complaint. But our trainer aircraft are not doing that. The fighter aircraft, they'll have airspace that's been sanctioned to go supersonic. When I was in Idaho, they had this ginormous military operating area to the south, and we could go supersonic in that, but you have altitude restrictions as well.
I know I lived out on a farm, and back when I was a kid, and X number of years ago, it was always common to hear a sonic boom. If the wind was dying down, you'd hear a high-pitched whistle, and that was like, I think, the plane coming toward you. But then, like, if he went away, like, boom. And then you heard like the afterburners, kick in.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was you guys or if the guys from down at like Amarillo, if they come out and fly. Around.
It would have been us that time. The T-38 had a different engine design in the past, and we used to do a mock. They'd get a certificate that you broke the mock, and that's been. It's 20 years ago for me. They used to do it a lot more routinely, but now with the new engines, and we no longer do the mock run with the students, and they still occasionally do a mock run when they do functional check flights. So there's been some problem with the airplane, and now especially trained guy goes up and goes to 35,000 feet and test out everything, and one of those is to go supersonic. But at that altitude, it's not nearly
Not at all anymore. Because it used to be a pretty common thing.
right. Right. Excuse me.
At this point in your career, would you recommend the military for your kids, and what branch would you recommend them join?
Oh, yes, I would, and that's how I know that there's not a problem. There's a problem, right? The the newspapers, we've got a problem. Anytime we're hurting one of our own, there's a problem. But it's not our culture. It's not, and it's the fish. We're in the fishbowl, and every time something happens, it gets. And this is my opinion. This is not the Air Force's opinion. Because caveat that for I feel perfectly comfortable with my daughter or my son going into the Air Force. I think it's a great opportunity. I think more people should serve, and that would give our decision makers a little bit more perspective if more of them had served. We're kind of out of that era now with the all-volunteer Air Force. I think the opportunities are just as great. Who knows what the future will hold, whether we transition to all remotely piloted aircraft, whether it's all cyber. I can't forecast out into the future that far, and I'm not at the pay grade where I can affect any of that change anyway. But I think the military is a very good opportunity for our kids, right? And I still feel that way about my own kids going to do that. The benefits of which service to go to depends on what you want to do. The Air Force is probably the most friendly to families, and it's the most higher percentage of officers to enlisted because our execution force, if you will, or the strategic execution, it happens with officers flying airplanes. Whereas the Army is primarily your infantryman, and the Marine Corps, same thing. So they have a lot more enlisted. And then the ships, for the Navy, is a huge, 5,000 of your closest friends living on a boat or ship together. So the Marine Corps, it used to be that the Army didn't go anywhere. They were an in-garrison force, basically. And then after Operation Iraqi Freedom, that has turned the Army on its tail. And now they're every 18 months to 24 months going on 10-month to 12-month deployments. All the way up to, I think they've had some 18-month rotations. And it's beaten them up. Their equipment isn't designed to be at that kind of operational pace. And the same thing's happening to the Air Force. Our airplanes are flying a lot more hours doing the combat operations since 1990 that we've been doing over there. And it's we're seeing that in the news. 50-year-old airplanes that have 100 years worth of flying is what they projected. The Navy's going to be gone a lot more than anyone else just because they are on a ship, right? So families aren't going to be with them there, but they get to see the world. Right? So it just depends on what the passion, and that's where whatever your son's, daughter's, grandchildren's passion is where they have to try and fit into the mix, because they're going to be doing it for a while. They got a plan like they're doing it for 20 years, so it's tough on Navy families to maintain a family, but the military makes it more difficult. But it's ultimately, you're the one that falls in love, so you make the decision to make it work or not work.
What's the most difficult part of the flight training, where more people have trouble, more of your students have trouble getting through the flight training?
I'd say getting through. We start them out, they don't know diddly squat, and we teach them how to take off land with the ultimate objective of going solo. So that's kind of the first marker. They're going to be safe to go solo. And the unique portion, I'll kind of run into the pilot training aspect of it. The biggest difference of Air Force pilot training to Navy pilot training, which includes the Marine Corps, is that we have a time constraint. So everybody has a syllabus constraint, how many sorties they get, but the Navy expands it out on an individual training timeline, whereas the Air Force has it set in stone. They start this time, they will finish at this time. So there's not, you have to learn at a pace as well, and that creates some challenges for folks. We sent a monkey to the moon by giving them enough bananas and treats to replicate a task. If we have enough resources and time, we can teach anybody to do it, but that's where the Air Force has minimized that, so we have a certain standard coming out the door. Not that the Air Force does it better than the Navy. The Air Force does it that way so they have a predictable output to then fill cockpits. It's not one way or another. Each has its benefits. Let's see. So I'll run through that then. How to do well in pilot training. I talked about the desire to fly, so then having the right attitude with it. So being humble, approachable, willing to take critiques, and then having a end state. So how light is that light at the end of the tunnel? Because it is a painful year. There is an incredible amount of information that we require them to learn. And this is just, in our 6 months in T6s, they have probably a stack of papers this big, publications, that they basically have to memorize. And then when they get to the T38 or the T1, the stack grows. But it's all under the foundation that they know that information here. So it's a lot easier for them to have context to the information. Whereas they start T6s and they have no idea. They're reading it and they have no idea what it means. But by golly, they can regurgitate it. They don't. And then they go out and fly, and then that starts to build some context around what they've just learned, so they have to go back and restudy it again. And that's a tough grind on a student that then also is working 12 hours a day as part of the syllabus, because we have those time constraints. So they're in our flight room for 12 hours. They go home, right? They got to sleep at some point, but they're studying, they're chair flying, pretending like they're flying so that they can run through the rears. And that wears on you, right? And sometimes they get weekends, sometimes they don't, because we'll do cross country flying. So it can be pretty burdensome if they don't have that bright light at the end of the tunnel that motivates them to deal with it.
Aren't you fellows required to spend a lot of hours in survival training?
Once they graduate pilot training,
yeah,
then we invest in them to go do the survival training, and it's a week long program, and then so one part's a week. You got survival and evasion, and then you got resistance training. So how do I keep from getting caught? How do I live off the land? How do I get on the radio to call people in to rescue me? And that's about a week's worth of time. And then you go into the resistance side. Okay, I got caught. How do I return with honor when they're trying to get the information out of you? And then you have another week of water survival training as well, where you go out. How do I survive in my little dinghy while I'm waiting for somebody to come pick me up?
Yeah.
In both friendly and hostile environments.
There's going to be a lot of that.
Yeah, we have refresher training, but the initial training itself it's about 3 total weeks, and then you go back and you take some computer training, or you go out and do a field training deal for a day and just rehack every year.
Are there still some international students that go through Vance's training thing and address how they learn versus American pilots?
Okay, yes, there are. We have, right now in T6s, we've got, I think about 10 Saudi Arabian students. We've got 3 Nigerian students. And there's a huge difference between a Nigerian student and a Saudi student, because the Nigerian kids haven't even driven cars. So, and we rely, when we're teaching the basics, going to grasping to something that they know. All right, you're on a 4-lane road. You're you're looking out in front. They got the brake lights. All right, you're thinking ahead. Nigerian kid, you don't have that. You're like, all right, when you're, I don't know what it is. When you're running, I don't know what that is. But so there's some different basic frames of reference that they have or they don't have depending on their background. Japanese students, they basically go through an entire pilot training syllabus before they even show up here, so they do really well. Singaporeans, same thing. They're uber prepared, and they do really well in the program. Saudi students, a lot of them are right out of high school. They're 18, 19 years old. This is their college, if you will. Pilot training is their college, so they're cadets. You try and the words matter, even though you say something. They may do something completely different. There's one story out there of a Japanese student flying around, and he keeps saying, "I'm not happy. I'm not happy. I'm not happy." Their controller's talking to him about traffic, and he's, "I'm not happy." Why are you not happy? What he was trying to say was, "I'm no joy," but the translation was, "I'm not happy. Not happy." So you run into challenges there. Break. Like we're wanting them to do something, break out, and you're not doing it. Well, we also have bail out, which means it's time to eject out of the airplane. And we had, "Sir, if you had said bail out one more time, I was going." So you just gotta be more diligent or more prepared, and they figure it out as well. We got the repetitions there. They're afforded an extra 10 hours for training due to language challenges, and then we get to. I personally will authorize them 10 more hours, and then that's it. So they do 20 hours, and a typical T6 program is 96 hours.
We have about 5 more minutes before people have to start.
Okay, all right. So hopefully that answered that question. Let's see. They've got to determine the best way to learn. A lot of people are, they're readers. Some people are listeners. Some people are doers. They got to figure out what the best way it is that they can learn and retain information and be honest with themselves with it. If they're having trouble, if what they're doing is not working, they got to be humble enough to seek help. And we got a lot of outside agencies, whether it be mental health, the chaplain. We got a military family life counselor. They've got a lot of skill sets to help improve their cognitive thought or compartmentalization. We have run into a lot of problems with the students that keep dwelling on what happened in the past, and they're using those brain bites to think about stuff in the past when they're still going 200 miles an hour, and they got to be thinking about what's about to happen to them, and that's where they run into problems, and it's kind of a shift. They need to be a team player, so helping their classmates out, and subsequently their classmates will help them. It's a tough program. I talked about God-given ability. Some people just can't adapt. A lot of people, we have some folks that wash out for air sickness. They try, they go spin. They put them in a Barony chair. It's just this chair that spins around and have them look all over the place. Really messes up your ears, if you will, and they do it until they puke. They just keep doing it and doing it. So that hopefully they're going to train their body to not be so overwhelmed by the 3 dimensions of flying. Some of them, they're able to get over it. Others aren't, and then we got to find them something else to go do. And you kind of put it in perspective. There's no pull over lane. If something goes wrong in the airplane, you can't just pull over the side of the road. Right? You gotta deal with what you got and make smart decisions, timely smart decisions, in order to get back safe on the ground. Let's see. Okay, then the last thing. So, impact of Vance on the local community. Skeeter kind of touched on that a little bit. Vance is now the second largest employer of folks in Enid. It used to be Continental, or it was Continental, then Pierre Foods, then Vance. Continental moved to Oklahoma City, so now Vance is the number 2 employer. It's pretty big. Enid would have a tough time if Vance was there, which is why they're so. They're just great people, but they have a vested interest in Vance being there. And when the BRAC commission came through, people were lining the streets to meet the BRAC commission to show their support for the base because it's so integral to the Enid community. 5.1 million. I just got briefed this yesterday. So 5.1 million is given in healthcare. So if you're in what the base can't do themselves, they send out referrals. So whether that be Oak City, whether that be Enid, whatever specialists are around, Vance Air Force Base spent $5.1 million on treating people or to doctors outside of the Vance gates. There's it's about a $12 million contract for all of our logistics and maintenance is contracted out. So we used to have PAE, Pacific Aerospace Incorporated, something like that, which PAE was CSC. Now L3 just took over the contract for the maintenance side, and PAE still owns the base operations support. So they make sure that everything's mowed and whatnot. But all of their employees, which is basically Enid or people from the local community that go there to work, is a pretty big chunk. Our cross-country budget alone, so what we spent to get training for our students, just in T6s, is right around $400,000. So unfortunately, you guys don't have a tower, so we're not going to spend the night here. But Senator Inhofe is definitely interested in keeping Vance around and ensuring that our training goes out to support the local folks. And FAA wanted to close down a bunch of TACANs, the navigation systems around, and they were able to close down some towers in order to save money. And we were with the sortie counts that we provide to Oklahoma City, that we provide to Woodring, they were able to basically say, hey, yeah, even when we were a small little airport, look at how much more traffic we have here than they have anywhere else. Go pick on somebody else. So we were able to take care of that. And then just us buying houses. We got 800 military folks on the base, just finding places to live. The oil boom has certainly made it more difficult to find places. There are basically no rentals in Enid other than really low-income rentals, because people are just selling their houses. We thought that when Continental left that it would mess everything up, but it didn't. It's amazing to me that no housing recession at all hit Oklahoma. For some reason, every place I move, I buy high and sell low for some reason. I don't know what it is, but when it's about time for me to leave, then it's time to
How much do you hate plane pilots? I'm a pilot. You get your way too much?
No, I mean, I understand the economics of it. Why do I want to spend eight gallons an hour to fly around the MOA when I can spend
14 gallons.
Yeah, all right, 14 gallons. And it's just understanding. Hopefully, our safety shop comes out and talks and sometimes has some safety calls so that they give you visibility on where our planes are going to be. Altitude is a big factor in that. You can still go direct someplace provided you're not 7,000 or above. Is primarily where we are. So we like the civilian pilots because you're doing the same thing that we're doing. Sometimes it results in delays, but we understand. It'd be ideal if had the altitudes.
On Thanksgiving Day, I shot an aerial photograph 3 miles southwest of Vance, and I called the tower, and they said we're not running today.
Mm-hmm.
So that was good. If I needed to do that while you were practicing, how would I get permission?
They wouldn't. There's just so much volume. Vance is the third busiest airfield in the Air Force. The amount of pattern, it's not normal, right? We use all of our gas teaching people how to take off and land. At fighter bases, at heavy bases, all that gas time is used out training to do the mission, assuming that you know how to land when you come back. So it's not nearly as busy at other places because of just the mission they're doing. It wouldn't be prudent. It wouldn't be safe for you to be in that area. And typically the weekends it's closed. Saturday's a perfect day. We don't fly. at all on Saturdays.
I'll make a comment. Of course, I told you I come over there quite often. I had the opportunity to come to promotion night one night. That's one of the coolest things that I've ever experienced. And they graduated class every, 3 weeks?
Yep.
Is that right, Troy? But on assignment night, the pilots within training, they do kind of a mini roast before the assignment, and then that young man, or I didn't see any women that night, but that young man, and they're kids, folks. I'm telling you, they're young people. They're kids. They're standing up there, and they still do the screen with the truck. There's some plane comes up. There's 3 planes come up on this overhead screen, and a big semi comes in and blows 2 of them up. And the plane that's left is the plane that pilot is getting to go fly, and they don't know it till then, do they?
No, they have a wish. They put in a wish list.
They put in, but they don't. And you can tell by the look on those faces whether they got what they wanted or what they didn't get. That particular night, I think they've changed it since then. There was 6 of them that were going to go to Nevada.
The
They'll
UAVs.
fly the manless airplanes that's been flying in Afghanistan and across the world. One kid got a F-16, he was the only fighter pilot that night. That's one of the coolest things that I've ever experienced. If anybody has the opportunity to go, you need to go, because it's well worth the evening to go over there and just watch it happen. It's cool.
Pilot training is unique because it's the only time that it's a merit-based system. So that's the only time the student's performance gives them the choice in the order of how well they did at what they go do in the future. After that, once you leave pilot training, you picked what you got. Now it's the people that are looking at ones and zeros to fill billets for the best needs of the Air Force. But at that point in time, they rack and stack their choices, and depending on how well they did, if the number one guy wants this, well, we try and get the number one guy or gal whatever they want, to include trading with other UPT bases to try and get that airplane. Once you get to number 2, now it's whatever's in the drop, and then if you are number 22, whatever's left. But you still are getting to go, ultimately with the goal of having the wings on your chest and going through. It doesn't matter what airplane they go to fly, it all fits into the Air Force mission, or the U.S. mission.
Do you still have an incentive ride program?
We did. Well, it's been dead for 2 years because of sequestration. The world wanted the public to know where the pain that there was pain associated with it, so we couldn't justify it. They're starting to spin it up again. The honorary commanders are, I think, this year going to get an incentive flight to go up. And 3 years ago, the honorary commanders did. Award winners get to go.
T6?
It's T6, T38, or T1. Yeah, I flew my honorary commander in T38 when he was.
You better adjourn the meeting. Can you hang around if somebody wants to talk to you afterwards?
Certainly.
So thank you all for coming.